Hello there. What's happening, y'all? How you making out? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Crash Bang Boom podcast. Today's episode is a continuation of the New Orleans drummer series I've been working on, and it is fitting that my new sponsor, New Orleans Record Press, brings you this episode today. New Orleans Record Press is the first independently owned and operated full-scale vinyl manufacturing plant based out of New Orleans. So if you're thinking of having vinyl pressed for your band or your project, or whatever you're looking to put on vinyl, go on over to NewOrleansRecordPress.com to view the myriad options of colors, patterns, get a real-time quote, and maybe even put an order down. I know I wake up the next day after a few drinks and realize I've ordered a couple records the night before, so the vinyl craze is in full swing up in here. Anyways, today's guest was one of my favorite drummers growing up and an absolute character, which you will find out shortly. Mike Ogden would be that guy, and his fusion of proggy weirdness and punk bombast was both a revelation and a monumental influence for me growing up. And his band Nutt was one of my favorites in the 90s and always had a way of bringing the creepy chaos to their gigs and recordings. So while you might not have heard of him, I thought it would be cool to reconnect with some of the drummers that were major influences on me growing up and, just see what's been happening with them and where they're at in life. So anyway, Mike and I get into some wild acid stories, trailer park and tramp stamps, favorite New Orleans shows growing up, titty bars, mushrooms, Jimi Hendrix, getting weird out in camps and woods and swamps, some of his drumming influences, plus organ transplants and getting a new lease on life. So sit back and get ready for the outrageousness. I swear we didn't huff, laugh, and gas or Cheech and Chong ourselves into a hysteric state prior to this one. Just a couple of dudes with beers, reminiscing and talking some wild shit. So here we go. Mike Ogden, y'all. Crash, bang, boom.
Crowds go mad with joy. Give the drummer some.
There it is.
How you doing, Jody?
Doing pretty good. Mike Ogden, I think I was thinking about names that I had for you. For a while there, I was going with Michelob Octagon.
Yes, I like that one. Or was it Octoban?
It might have been Octoban, because you did play fucking, is it Octoban or Octobands?
Octobands. Well,
really?
It's kind of like tomato, whatever.
Depends who you talk to, if you're Yaddy or
exactly.
if you're not Yaddy.
And mine are the 80s ones, so they probably are Octobans, People were trying to be pretentious or something.
You still have them?
Yes.
What originally, was it Bill Bruford or Alex Van Halen?
Yes, definitely Bruford.
Yeah.
I saw when Alex had him, he had, a 96-piece drum set, but he still played 4/4 on trap kit. So
right.
They were kind of useless. But
right.
Yeah, Bruford definitely kind of woke me up to that. And then as I was into that, and actually later on in my life when Primus first came on the scene, the whole Frizzle Fry thing, and one of the first things I noticed was, man, he's playing Octobands as well, and Stuart Copeland too.
Of course.
So Bruford first, then Copeland, and to this day they're still, to me, they are the rule book.
That's so awesome.
I mean, where do you get? It's the time and the master. The clock and the master. What do you do?
I love it that you're holding on to the Octobans, man.
Like Bruford talks about, using the hi-hat for part of the groove. You're trying out a tom. Then you add a roto-tom or an octoband. The whole thing is totally different. Next thing you know, you got an African thing going or a tribal thing, and it's not necessarily tribal. It's just a straight beat, but it sounds insane. That's the fun part about it.
Well, I was thinking about it earlier, and we'll bounce all over the place. This is going to be a lesson in attention deficit disorder to the highest degree.
What? Wait, we didn't do this. Cheers, Jody. I miss you, sir.
Oh, yeah. Good to see you, buddy.
We're drinking beer.
For those of you that are listening to this, we're out at the brewery that Michelob Octoban works at, Royal Brewery, Crescent City Craft Beer in New Orleans, Louisiana.
That's right.
There's actually a really crazy titty bar out here that I went to.
Visions.
Yes.
It is the exclusive titty bar in the city. They have food. They have, limo service. It's actually quite nice.
I saw a chick dancing crazy style, and she had a corn like the band, not a corn on the cob. That would have been, I don't know, would have been more
That would
awesome.
have been more Randy Muller stuff.
The band Korn tattooed. She had a tramp stamp of Korn.
I'm sorry.
But you know what? It was awesome.
I'd rather the corn on the cob. I'd rather the corn on the cob. That'd be more my kind of speed.
So you have an interesting distinction in that you were the first person that I've interviewed on my own podcast who actually subbed in for me in my own band.
Yeah, that was not fun, by the way. That was hard. He's a very precocious drummer, ladies and gentlemen. I had to bring the octobands out just to make it unique.
Absolutely. But what's fucked up is that the whole way that came about was that I got in a barroom brawl with some rednecks.
That's a better story. I love that story. I was like, wait, Jody did what? I remember going, Jody did what? Oh.
So what happened was I'd come back from Colorado. I went out to see my mom, and I dyed
with the Rocky Mountain High.
With the Rocky Mountain High. I dyed my hair green because I thought that's what people do when they go to Colorado. And I was hanging out at a redneck bar on the North Shore.
Yeah, I think at the time that was the only game in town, besides the other redneck bar where you would definitely get in a fight. This one was a little more subdued.
Right. So it seemed.
Right.
So I rolled in and with my green hair, and there were these. I was talking to, luckily, a guy that one of my mother's ex-students. My mother is a teacher, an art teacher, and I ran into him, and he's a big, tough dude, and it's a good thing because we were outnumbered. But at one point, one of the rednecks
Of course, that's how they fight.
Right. So one of the rednecks said, "Say, man, why's your hair green?" And I was like, "'Cause I absorb less heat during these hot-ass Louisiana summers, man. What the fuck you got to say about it?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "What the fuck you say?" And then that was like
That's
the most,
it.
yeah.
Click.
And the next thing I knew, man, the dude was like jumped up on the bar and is literally running down the bar like the Wild Wild West.
And it's a big, nice. It's like it's a good
It's a-
chest high bar, and
Yeah.
it's a big, beautiful bar.
It's a big, long bar.
Yeah, it's got to be 30, 40 feet long.
He was scuffing it up with his fucking cowboy boots, man, running up, down it, knocking lamps out the way as he ran down it.
Shit.
I ended up behind the bar. He swung a vodka bottle at my head. The whole thing
Was
fucking
it
happened.
good vodka or was it well?
Yeah, I think it was just well. So, I was
So yeah,
like,
you
fuck
got to
that.
avoid that one. Yeah, I mean if it's something good, you'll take the hit, take
Right.
one for the team.
Yeah. So I don't know. At some point, I slammed his face into the cash register and proceeded to beat his ass.
Wait, did it ding?
For the sake of the record, yeah, it went
Awesome.
cha-ching.
Yes. Here we go. Yes. That was
Cheers. But in the end, I broke my hand. And then I called you and said, "Hey, man, we got this gig, and the rest of my band doesn't want to cancel the gig at Checkpoint Charlie's playing for 10 people.
Yeah, I
God forbid
I had
that.
to go play with these kids I'd never met, and they were kids at the time. I had to go some weird directions out in the country, so I thought it was like a setup. It was like a trailer in the middle of like meth country or something. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I walk in, and these kids are like these little prog jazz freaks, and I'm like, wait, I'm in the what? What's going on here? So I was like, yeah, it wasn't an easy gig, but filling in for you never is.
It was fucking great seeing you play those songs, man. It was a great time.
It reminds me of the time I had to fill in for AP Gonzalez of the Black Problem, which is even worse. Fill in. Yeah, AP decides to not show up, but of course, played with this band all the time. They were one of my favorites, but I had never tried to play any of their songs. I just, liked them, and all of a sudden I'm trying to play it. I was like, wow, Mike Joseph on lead bass,
Rest in peace.
Yeah, Ben Elman, all these crazy people, and it was insane, man.
The 90s. Let's talk about the 90s.
Wow, let's do. I was awake for the 90s.
It was
Pretty much.
late 90s that it started to wane a little bit.
Yeah, I started getting a little tired. So you got to go to bed at some point. Yeah.
What was the early 90s like for you? Because for me, it was amazing seeing your bands, all the bands that would play, all those gigs. So we're basically talking about a section of what is the Lower Garden District between what was the RC Bridge Lounge, now Barrel Proof on Magazine, and the Abstract Cafe, which is no longer there. The building is still there.
It's actually kind of an interesting time because in the mid to late 80s, I started my first band in high school, and we were playing a lot. We were doing original music, kind of like space rock kind of stuff. Of course, we lived on the North Shore where Jody spent his time, and there wasn't a lot of that going. There was more rednecks and whatever pop music was on. So, we were practicing on a farm. We had lots of cows, if you know what I mean. So there was a lot of free time to space out and do things. We couldn't play many gigs at the local, pool hall. They weren't looking for space rock hippies from the woods. So we started playing in New Orleans a lot. So I started gigging actually in New Orleans at 17. So back then you could drink at 18, but we weren't really supposed to be in the bar at 17.
Right.
But everybody did. But one of the first people we played with was Black Problem, Lou Thevenot, and AP and Mike Joseph and all those guys. So we played with them and started playing shows in the city with a bunch of different types of bands. And at that time, when I was 17, 18, I moved in with Mike Williams, singer for I Hate God. We moved in together. We lived together for several years, so he turned me on to the whole hardcore scene in New Orleans, which totally changed everything. So I had like a space rock background, and all of a sudden I'm thrust into the local New Orleans hardcore scene. I mean, we had everybody back then, We had Shell Shock, we had Corrosion, we had Exhorter. I mean, all these amazing bands were going on, and I was just like completely, my mind was just like opened up to like, wow, this is amazing. And what's funny is when I was younger, I was listening to what we call, metal, which is, bands like Dokken, YFT, these
hair metal.
Yeah, hair metal and pop metal and maybe Judas Priest, but nothing like really seriously heavy. I wasn't ever exposed to because I just wasn't.
Right.
So it was a real change for me, and it was like eye opening. And then seeing Bad Brains for the first time at 17, it was just like, okay, this is how you do it. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
So it changed my whole perspective, but I still had like a prog background. Very, very, influenced by Crimson and other bands like that. But I always thought it was interesting to, if you could have the hardcore heaviness, but also, an interesting groove, a dynamic that you could throw in there. So that was always kind of been my approach. If you can mix King Crimson and Bad Brains, you got something going on,
Yeah. Maybe I got that from you.
Maybe so. I know when we met, we kind of, always kind of dug all that stuff together too. And something I had said a few years ago to a friend is like, everybody talks about Nirvana, back in the day. And actually, back in the day, I didn't really listen to Nirvana.
Yeah.
Like, we listened to, I remember the mid to late 90s with Gary from Nutt. We listened to, he turned me on to Bleach, and I thought Bleach was great. And I was digging it.
By the way, y'all hear that fucking plane right above our heads?
Yeah, we can, see the numbers on it. I think they see the pilots waving at us.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, at the time, Nirvana was on the radio. I'm not no distant to them; they were a great band, but it's just not what was. Everything that was really going on in the '90s was in the underground.
Right.
There was a lot of stuff, they had the bigger bands like that, but in New Orleans had such a great underground scene. It was like you almost didn't pay attention to that unless you were sitting at home, chilling out, vegging out, watching MTV.
Right.
'Cause that's what you did when you're home. Otherwise, you were out doing stuff. And then we had so much live music, and everybody back then came to New Orleans, too. The touring acts came. But the band that really changed everything at that time was Jane's Addiction.
Right.
And nobody says that, but that's honestly the Nothing. I got chills right now. The Nothing Shocking tour. The first time they came to New Orleans at Tipitina's, it was insane, man. There was no also, for me, my top 3 favorite shows ever would have to be...
Oh, this is good. I'm about to hear this. All right.
Yeah, my top 3 favorite would be Bad Brains, Eye Against Eye Tour, Tipitina's, HR comes out, does like a backflip onto the stage. So it was like, what's going on,
Yeah.
But I'm so young and overwhelmed. It was awesome, but I was just like, yes, okay, this is crazy. So we're sitting there, we're up top, my old bass player and I, and we're sitting there in the corner where the upstairs is, and then somebody's passing around like a Cheech and Chong sized joint,
Yeah.
I'll take a hit, and all of a sudden I feel this tapping, on my shoulder. I was like, what the hell? I'm about to pass the dude, and it's an NOPD hitting me tapping me with a nightstick, and he goes, you have to go downstairs to do that, son. I was like, yes, sir. We're 17, so we're fucking haul ass.
Oh,
get
man.
out of there. And then we sneak back in, and we get like in the pit, and that's what changed everything. When Jane's Addiction came down, at this time I was living with Mike Williams, and Jimmy Bauer had gone to California, to San Francisco, to hang out with the Melvins. So he brought back some real gems. I mean, he was like in their studio practice space, hanging out with them, and brought back demos. But at the time, really important, he brought back a cassette. Everything was cassettes back then, which is hilarious now. Soundgarden and Jane's Addiction.
Come on.
Game changers, right? Total game changers.
Jimmy Bauer imported that back
to us. So you're like, our little group, So the first time Soundgarden comes through, and this is like, I think Jimmy gets back like on a Sunday or something. This is when we're all living right in Fat City, bro.
Uh-huh.
So Jimmy comes, with the cassettes, and I'm like 17, 18, so I'm baked all the time.
Yeah.
He pops in the Jane's Addiction. We didn't have a TV. We had a fireplace, so we just had like a jam box in there. That was our TV.
Yeah.
But he pops this in. I'm so fucking stoned for like a day and a half. I didn't know Perry was a guy because he had kind of that high-pitched
high
voice.
as fuck.
And there was nothing for me to look at.
Right.
There was no album
Right.
cover. It was a cassette with
Right.
handwritten shit. The next night they're playing at Tips, and I'm still, till they came out on stage, I thought it was a chick singer. Yeah, he had like long lime green dreads, this fucking Mexican head. And it was amazing. He just looked insane. But it took him about 30 minutes to start playing. The crowd was I've never seen a crowd that thick at Tips. And back then, that's when everybody played there too.
Right.
So there was always packed. But once they started with Mountain Song, I think.
Oh, nice.
Dude, the pit, you could not even. Normally, there's like a pit, and then you could still get drinks though, and
Right.
people in the back. No, it wasn't even a pit. It was a wave from the stage going out the door. I was like a foot off the ground. I couldn't even stand on the ground. It was insane. Really? So I got chilled. Like, I'm telling you the story. I'm trying to keep my chills out. It was probably. Definitely, I'd have to say the Bad Brains first for me, but then the Jane Show, and then probably the next one would be Soundgarden. Exactly around the same time, like I said, when Jimmy turned us all into him. Oh. Yeah, so this is like the first album. They were still touring in a van, so they get there. This old club called Muddy Waters, which is near the Maple Leaf in New Orleans, which
Right.
is still around.
Right.
But the Muddy Waters is no longer around. But it was a little kind of a dive bar, but it had a great sounding stage. Anyway, a lot of local acts. Anyway, so they come through. And, of course, we're just hearing these guys. So we're like, yeah, this is fucking heavy, man. We got to go check this out.
Yeah.
So it was like maybe 10 of us, dude. It was the guys, it was an old man bar during the day. So you
course.
had these guys who would get there at 11. They drink their little Pilsners or whatever all
Yeah.
day. And then the kids come in at night, for the rock and roll.
Right.
So that was us. So we come in, and, everybody's got long hair, and, these old men are grouchy and shit. And there's probably like 3 or 4 of them at the bar. They won't even turn around, they drink
Right.
their beer. And it's like I said, it's maybe a handful. It's like Jimmy Bauer and Mike Williams from I Hate God, Steve Dale. I'm Jimmy Gorman maybe. I'm
Yeah.
missing some people.
Yeah.
But it was It was our little group. It was I swear, like a handful of us. And
Yeah.
Soundgarden kicks in. Fucking what? It was like, if you're a Soundgarden, they're an amazing band, especially if you never heard them and they're live in your face. Right. And I was like,
I can't even imagine. That's
Yeah.
like you saw your generation Zeppelin.
Oh yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
this is the time they still had the Asian bass player.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this band is this heavy, and they got like this male model guy, for a lead singer, but he could fucking sing his ass off, So they're fucking heavy as hell.
Yeah.
And then they take a break, and Kim leaves his guitar on the amplifier, just feeding
feed
back.
back.
We go outside, and they're like, we're gonna hang out. It's like I said, there's only a handful of us.
Yeah.
Well, they tell us this whole story. We're gonna burn down with them. They're like, yeah, definitely. Well, they were coming from like the Midwest, coming down or something. As soon as they cross in the border of New Orleans, Louisiana, they get pulled over with like a pound of weed.
Uh-oh.
Yep. So their lawyer had to get them out, and it somehow got them out. Like in northern Louisiana, Hick Central got them out. These long-haired dudes from California, of all places.
Oh, Jesus.
Gets them out, and they made it to the gig. This shitty little, dive bar with like 10 of us there.
Oh, man.
And so we burned them down. So they were thankful, but they told us this whole story. And dude, I was like, what? And I was a fan. Then every year, the next year they came to Tipitina's. Then it was Lollapalooza. They blew up in 3 years. It was like boom,
Right.
boom, boom. Like they were like Van Tour, biggest club in the city you could play at. Then like Lollapalooza, and then an auditorium.
Right.
That's how it went. It was like boom, boom, boom. And I'll throw a number 4 in there.
Okay, let's go for number 4.
Number 4, because it might be the milk around all of it. Was again at the same time. This is late '80s, early '90s.
Yeah.
Right at the time, the Melvins Ozma tour.
Oh, Jesus, you saw that tour?
At the same club, Muddy Waters.
Come on.
I'm like 17, 18. There's so many fucking people. I had to stand on a cigarette machine, which I don't think they even have in clubs anymore. The old
No, they
pull-out,
don't.
You'd pull out the spring thing. Anyway, I had to stand on that. Buzz, what the original bass player for I can't think of her name right now. Shirley Temple's granddaughter.
What?
The original bass player for the Melvins.
That was literally Shirley Temple?
Yeah, it was her granddaughter.
Come on.
Oh yeah.
What
Yeah.
the fuck? Are
Yeah,
you
and she
serious?
was fucking badass. Yeah.
I remember her being in the band. I know she played on Ozma.
Yeah,
but
you can see some of the old videos if you look. Like YouTube has some old like late '80s
Yeah.
at a school at a college thing.
Yeah.
And dude, she's fucking sick, and she's also on the album like holding the cat and everything. But anyway,
Right.
so that lineup that was like again, my real parents passed away when I was a little kid, when I was 2 years old. but my real dad had a record store from like 68 till he died, about 72. All vinyl, back in the day. But he would get like promotional copies. Literally back then they would stamp it. I had hundreds of his albums, so I would just listen to music. I listened to everything.
Yeah.
But I got turned on to a lot of prog rock and kind of heavy classic stuff like that. So that was my background. And then when I started playing music, I kind of met some guys at my school who were kind of geared that way. And then also we had my bass player's older brother and turned us on to Zappa. So I had all that. It was like my mind was being blown by all these these musicians like that. And then it was like a 180, getting in a car wreck when the whole hardcore thing happened, and then seeing the Melvins and Bad Brains, Fishbone, all these bands, just changed everything. So
yeah,
it was a really good time. When going back to a million miles ago, when you asked me how that time was, I went through all that before Nutt.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was like it was like our whole generation was a transitional generation anyway.
Right.
And that's what I'm so glad I was born in 1970. So I'm really glad about that, because we had the technology happening, the whole transformation.
Yeah.
But there was a period of time where it was like everything is DIY, everything was lo-fi and just real and just in your face, and it was a special time.
Speaking of muddy waters, I got a fucked up one for you. You're truly gonna blow my mind if you were at this gig. So a good buddy of mine, Brian Berthium, I love him to death. We've been in bands together. He also owns a space in CRS. He's been there for like fucking 20 years or whatever. For those of you listening to this that might not know, this is a wooden warehouse that has practice spaces in it that you can drive up into the
very
second story
sketchy fucking drive,
and feel the wood bending underneath your car.
Oh, yeah.
At some point or another, somebody's gonna go through the motherfucker.
And if it's raining, which it does almost every day in the summer,
yeah,
you got to go down with your brakes all the way on, and the door doesn't open all the way sometimes, so you got to wait. Yeah, it's sketchy, man.
It's super sketchy. It's an amazing place. But he went.
But a lot of good music.
A lot of great music came out of that fucking place. But he went to a Muddy Waters show, and this is one of my favorites, man. It was pool league night. So like you said, a bunch of fucking random yahoos in there just fucking smoking cigarettes and shooting pool. And this band Tragic Mulatto comes through, and the band rolls through, and immediately they had to like open up the doors all the way so they could pull these giant truck horns on like these wheels. So all these dudes are like, what the fuck they bringing truck horns in here for? Like that's a reasonable enough question.
Oh shit.
So they bring them in, and then like these three like fat chicks come in with this like little like gimp looking dude who's loading most of their equipment and everything. And then they have the truck horns on the side of the stage, in addition to the PA and everything else that was fucking in there.
Insane.
So they come out, come gig time, and they got like black lights on, and these three fat chicks have stripped down to diapers. With just like some tape on their nipples.
Nice.
And he said the drummer, like she might have had a bass drum, but she played it standing up, and it was like this series of like toms that she played standing up with whatever. And he was like, what the fuck, man? He was like African, but not African at all. It was like meth African or something. So as this fat chick is playing drums, he said her titties were like swinging pendulously,
They were adding extra beats in the downbeat.
Right. So her diaper starts to slide down. And he's
was
like,
it because it was full?
No, well, that's where this is all going. All roads lead to a full diaper.
All loads do too.
Yeah. So she ends up, the diaper slips all the way down.
Oh,
she steps out of it, and the little gimpy guy that loaded their equipment and set the stage up comes over and pulls out what appears to be a turd, and he eats it. And at that point, Brian said he heard the pool sticks hit the floor.
Nice.
It turns out it was a Snickers, but she rode with it in her diaper.
No, it was still fucking nasty.
Oh.
But she pulled a Caddyshack. She pulled
in her diaper and had the gimp eat it.
There was years ago when L7 was, I think, on the Smell the Magic tour. They started the tour in New Orleans. Again, at this time, everybody played down here, so it was in the early 90s. It was nothing but great shows. But L7 came, started the tour, and ended the tour here. And I think the first show, she pulls out her tampon and just flings it out in the crowd. It's just like fucking nasty. It's like great stuff. Back then it was just great. Everybody was like, you'd meet all these, great touring bands, rock stars of the day.
Right.
And most of them were just cool as shit. One of the coolest bands I ever hung out with was Helmet. The music hall show, though, I took them out. Like I was hanging out with a friend of mine who would get us tickets backstage, got us in everywhere. She was an EMT, so we got in everything free. But anyway, so for some reason, whatever happens, end up talking, we're talking backstage with them. They're like, well, what is there to do tonight? I'm like, well, y'all want to go to Molly's? So I'll take them down. That's where we went to Molly's on Decatur Street.
Right.
So they're like, well, we'll ride with you. And I'm like, okay, I'm freaking out. I'm like, dude, we didn't have cell phones back then. I would have been calling Jody. I would have been calling everybody, like, dude, helmet is in my car right now.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what the fuck? Helmet's in my car. They're all kind of, they're kind of quiet, kind of serious dudes. And I'm like, me, I'm all over the place, energetic, crazy, and I'm fanboying out on helmet. And I'm like, well, what the fuck do I play? So I'm like, put on Bad Brains, and everybody's like, hell yeah! So,
nice.
It worked, and we're headbanging, driving all the way downtown from like Mid City or whatever, and we get down to Molly's, and it's Decatur Street, it's New Orleans, it's the scene. Well, none of them drank really.
Really?
Except for the original Australian guitar player. He got fucking hammered, and the next year he was out of the band.
As a limey redneck, he got ejected.
Totally out of bounds. He would have he would have fit New Orleans well. Yeah, so we hit Molly's, and he was hammered in an hour. The other guys were kind of standing there. They were being polite as people would come up, but they were basically standing in the wings, Paige and all those guys. But
that's amazing.
Dude, that was one of the fun. It was like, dude, helmet is in my car.
Yeah. That's weird as fuck, man.
That was amazing.
Do you remember the first time that you saw I Hate God? Because I remember it.
Yeah, I remember actually, like I said, I lived with Mike at the time when Crawl Space was still around.
Yeah.
Before I Hate God. And I remember their first show. It was funny. We lived in Fat City at the time.
Which, by the way, first of all,
it's Fat City, bro. It's a whole nother world. So the first time they played, we're playing at a club. We lived a half a block away. So, of course, I walk down there. We walked the amplifiers down the street. That's how close we were. Wheeling Marshalls down the street. And then they come on and, people are kind of, standing around. It's kind of heavy, and Mike's getting like there's not enough activity. So he starts the whole throw shit campaign. So for a couple of years, that was his whole thing. He'd be like, throw shit. And people were literally, it'd be at I Hate God shows, people throwing like garbage and fucking trash cans, and then it turned into bottles, it gets crazy. But in the early days, it was like, I think Mike was just bored. It's just like, come on, dude, this is fucking heavy. And people were still like this isn't, you got to think, this is the era of thrash metal, And even Exhorder was still around. So all these bands were like fucking, the fast and the speed it was great, intense. But the Melvins changed the game with how slow can you go.
Right.
And then I Hate God comes out with their shit, which is, the New Orleans,
Swamp blues, Melvins.
Exactly. Got a little bit of fire on it.
Yeah.
A little bit of dance move on it. And it was just like, holy shit. I don't think people were really ready in the beginning. And then once they got it, it was it took off like an animal. But that's how it was back then. It was just, it'd be some crazy shit would happen, It was always fun,
The first time I saw them was at the Abstract. They only played there twice. I still have the flyer from it. And when they showed up, I stuck around for about a song and a half. And Mike started breaking chairs and shit. And I was like, fuck this, I'm getting out of here.
Oh, yeah.
I rolled.
He would usually hurt himself. It was like, it wasn't, I don't think he was accomplished unless he hurt himself. It's like, nobody else would get hurt, but it was like, half the time he'd fall into speakers and do some,
right.
Like the first time White Zombie came to town, this was on their first tour, the first album tour. That had to be early to mid-90s, probably 94, 95, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we hadn't seen each other in a while. Again, before cell phones, he calls me on the home phone. Hey, dude, we're playing in Baton Rouge at the Varsity. You got to come see us. You got, just come up, meet us up there. I'll get you in, all that, whatever. You're on the list. I'm like, cool, all right. So drive up there, and which is an hour away from New Orleans or whatever. And just not good. I'm going to see I Hate God an hour away by myself. Like I'm gonna get loaded. So it was gonna be a rough drive home. But anyway, we get up there, and of course we get in free, hanging out with the bands backstage. We're hanging out, meeting Rob Zombie, Sean, all these people. And I was just like, wow, what is this? I Hate God comes on. I think Mike dropped a hit of acid like as soon as he got on stage.
Oh God!
Like somebody gave him something, and he dropped. Because I remember him going, "The fuck am I? I think I'm on acid." I was like, "What?" And then like halfway through the show, he's falling back into the monitors. It was fucking awesome.
Wow.
Anyway, they killed it, and it was great. And then White Zombie comes out, and boom, everybody was just like, wow. And it was just, they put on a fantastic show.
Really?
I don't think Sean stopped spinning her hair, banging her head the whole time.
Right.
It was like, I'd never seen a chick rock out like that,
Her neck and her back, she's still dealing with.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure she is. And I think the guitar player, he was the original guitar player. I think, did they trade him or the drummer? I think the original guitar player.
I don't remember.
One of them from the first album, they traded out. But anyway, he was headbanging and jamming out, bit one of his fucking dreads off. Because, dreads is dry. It's so dry. But anyway, he just kept going. And he's like, dread goes flying. It was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I ended up outside, shirtless, on the ground in the alley because the alcohol consumed and other things, in the heat. So I woke up again with a cop tapping me on the shoulder like, you need a ride, son? I was like, no, I'm okay now. Yeah, instantly I was sober. So that's how that show ended for me.
Jesus Christ, that's amazing.
Yep.
What in the 90s, like I feel like in the early 90s the drugs were a little different, and then like somewhere in the mid 90s they changed.
They were more like classic. You kind of knew what you were getting into with things, and you'd find your chosen and go that way.
Right. Do you feel like at some point the darker drugs made the scene darker?
Yeah. So I spent the 80s on acid, basically acid and weed, and then, the late 80s and all of the 90s on coke and a portion of the 90s on meth, and the city changed. Back then it was like you could go out and come home annihilated, tripping, get laid, fill up your car. It was like gas was like $1, cigarettes were 95 cents. You go get a 32-ounce of beer at Decatur House for $2. And somehow you could go, $10 and be like a baller. It was like you were balling. You'd be up for 3 days. What happened, And then all of a sudden, because everybody kind of got freaked out after, everybody went from, what's mine, whatever I have, I'll share it with you,
Right.
That's how New Orleans used to be, too. It was also like you kind of give everybody the same chance to be an asshole or not.
Oh,
like
yeah.
You open up your home
it's
to people.
It's super tolerated here.
Right.
It's amazing.
It's like, oh, yeah, you're from out of town. Oh, man, you can stay in my guest room. We'll feed you, put some weight on you, whatever. Oh, yeah, I got an ounce of Coke. Yeah, share it. Here you go. That's how it used to be. And then it kind of became mine. Right. I think a lot of that was from when there was a big wave of crystal meth hit the city. City people and crystal meth I don't know if it's bad as country people.
You got to keep that out in the country, man.
But country people can, they can do a lot of dark shit over periods of time before anybody knows it. That's the problem with, people out there. They build up arsenals and shit.
Right.
In the city, it's right now. So there's a lot of intensity right now, and there's too much of that. And I think a lot of that affected the scene.
Yeah.
For me, the 90s, like I was born in 70s, so every year is an easy year to remember. So, around the year of the classic year that a lot of the superstars died, 27.
Yeah.
I was there myself. I mean, I was right there to like, if I wouldn't have, gotten married around that time, I'd probably be dead.
No shit.
I was literally on the path because what happens is, and it's funny when you get sober and all that, you don't realize, like you and I are blessed with a talent, with this energy that we were able to focus into something, and all the drugs and all the alcohol, when you realize it, none of that really, that's kind of a distraction.
Right.
When you're young, yes, it's a social thing and it builds up energy, but really it's in the way, because when you take all that away, you still have the gift if you're lucky to use it. I remember when, the early days of Nutt, I was just talking about this the other night. We would actually go out together as a band and put up flyers, and it was the funnest fucking thing.
Yeah.
We'd go out drinking together, and people were like, well, what does your band sound like? Well, what do you like? Oh, we sound just like that. So we'd have fucking, well, yeah, we play jazz. Yeah, we play country, whatever. Just fucking show up. And we'd have these weird people that freak people out. Some people would stay, some people would run out, But that's what we did. And then over time, you start doing, just like girlfriends or people who get married can separate. Drugs do that to bands too.
Right.
Alcoholism does that. But a lot of times it's the drug thing, because you have people on the outside who are watching you and want that energy from you. And I think it's like vampire. People call them vampires, you know,
Right.
soul vampires, you know. Yeah. So I think that's what happens to a lot of people, sadly. And then there's a time for some people, unfortunately, they can't stop, or they expire to it, or it takes over their life and they lose it. Well, I mentioned my friend Mike Williams earlier. It's funny, we talk all the time. We're brothers for life. Like I said, we lived together when we were younger, but we both had transplants last year. He had a liver transplant. I had a kidney transplant. So
Jesus Christ.
We are Miracle Mikes. That's what I call us now.
The Miracle Mikes.
That's right. And it's like, we're like, dude, how the fuck are we just like, I don't know. How are we still here? Because, the way we used to party was like, unless you were really there, you wouldn't. If I could sit here and tell you stories, you wouldn't believe it. Right. Unless you were there. And I have friends who are like, how are we alive,
Yeah.
But I think part of our youth, the way we partied like harder probably than rock stars, than most rock stars around. So it was like our youth is kicking our ass in our middle age. But I've learned a lot from it. It's like, I make beer. I love beer, and I like my little wine. But the whole drug thing for me is, I'm definitely over that. But there was a period of time where it was glamorous, but it quickly becomes unglamorous. But yeah, on the flip side though, I made it through that. A lot of people don't make it through that, sadly,
Sure.
And I'm on the other side of that, and I'm still going, man, life is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, how did I make it through that? I can tell a story, and I get the same feeling I had when I was doing it back then.
Right.
Now, as a middle-aged person, just by talking about it. Open the veil once, maybe, and then put that shit away. I don't know if you could do that, but so to just say maybe, I don't know which. Stay away from heroin and meth. I don't know, man.
Just say maybe.
Don't do needles.
Right. That's fair enough,
I
man.
I don't know.
So I'm realizing we talked about Nutt a good bit without actually really talking about what that band was. So from my perspective, in fact, here's the crazy thing, dude. The first gig that I ever played was at the Abstract Lounge.
Mm-hmm.
It was with your band,
Yeah,
Nutt.
we played with y'all.
And it snowed that night.
That's right. It did snow that night. It was unbelievable.
It was the weirdest.
And across,
dude, can you imagine for me, first gig I ever play, I see you play, and then I walk outside and it's snowing?
If you're a drummer and it's snowing and you hit your finger on the rim, gig over. It hurts. Playing drums is a contact sport. But on the other side of town, while that went on, was also the first time Rage Against the Machine came to town, the power went out at Tips that night, and they just did a big drum circle.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Holy shit.
Snowing in New Orleans, weird shit happens, man. Weird shit happens.
Apparently, the first time I come to fucking play a gig, it just mixes everything up, man.
Yeah.
I like to. I'm thanking myself for bringing the snow.
You brought the snow. Well, yeah, we brought the snow in other ways. It snowed all the time. You just don't realize it.
So one of my takeaways from seeing y'all that night was, one, great energy, but also some spookiness. So where did the great energy come from that band, and where did the spookiness come from?
Well, some of the when I first got together with those guys, they had quite a, probably maybe even a whole set worked out. Maybe, at least 10 to 15 songs. And I heard it, and I was like, I liked it right away. I liked what they were doing, but I wanted to change some things. I was like, man, if this sped up a little bit of darkness would be nice. Like I said, I was very influenced by King Crimson. I was in a space rock band, but also my guitar player was a witch, so we were very into, powers of the earth, mushrooms, LSD, and there's a lot of energy and power in that, and there's a lot of darkness. We weren't necessarily black arts or anything like that. It was just more energy. when you're out in the country, out in the woods, and you're free to jam, it's beautiful. Life is, it's great. But when you bring it to the city where it's nasty, it's dirty, there's real shit in your face, there's crime, there's murder, there's beautiful stuff too, but there's a lot of bad shit going down in New Orleans,
Yeah.
especially late 80s,
Fuck yeah.
In the 90s, there was, New Orleans has always been somewhat of a violent city, it's a port city, tourist type city. But there was a period of time in the 90s, we were doing so much shit. People didn't really fuck with us because we just looked crazy,
Right.
But we were hanging out in way bad areas I would never go to now, or I would never allow my children to go to, or tell a tourist to go to. Yeah, we were doing the deal. We were bad. But I think a lot of that, came from the energy around us. Doing lots of acid together, seeing what happened, because of my first band, we would take acid and just play and see what happened. Mm-hmm. Well, when Nutt got together, we would practice out in Mississippi at a camp, and we would drop or do shrooms together and just jam and see what happened. And then when we did it in the city, I think it got darker. We had this John Anderson. If you can get in touch with John, apparently, because we unfortunately lost a lot of stuff in Katrina and things like that, but he's been
I remember seeing a cassette tape that said the camp demos.
Right. He's got it, and I can get you all that because I have a bunch of that. Just got it again recently. Every few years, thank God, John is a curator and revamps it to whatever modern technology, platforms. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm still on Jamby. Like, where's the cassette? I still listen to CDs. I mean,
right.
I like CDs in my car. I'm happy.
Right.
Every time somebody's like, "Yeah, I can burn you," I'm like, "Can you burn me a CD?" They're like, yeah. Give me a little more time. But anyway, so John thankfully saved all that. But we had this one particular time. I was dating this girl at the time who was having an art opening. And so, she had a nice little gallery on Magazine Street. And we had all dropped this, I think it was some window paint. I don't know if it was green or if it was like Zeppelin acid or something. It was, whatever it was definitely intense. But so as a band, we went out together, except for Gary. Gary didn't do anything but smoke cigarettes. And drink. He just smoked a lot of cigarettes.
Gary being the sample player, keys player of the band.
Right, he was the quiet one.
The quiet one,
but he was probably the strangest cat of all. But sweetheart of a man. But anyway, so Ray and John and I are all at this thing, and I invited them there, and we were going to jam that night and just go write some new songs. Well, we all decided to drop at this gallery.
Oh boy.
All these hoity-toities and regular people there too. Well, anyway, the acid starts coming on, and I'm like, I need to go outside and smoke a cigarette. I know everybody in there, and you know how I am. I'm chatty Cathy. I talk to people, but it was starting to hit me where I was like uncomfortable. Like I can't be myself right now. The energy is within. I'm going inward. I started going on the introverted trip, and I'm like needed to get away for a little bit. So I go outside to smoke a cigarette, and my girlfriend's dad is out there. He's smoking a cigar, and I had like worked for him part-time one summer or something, so it was like really uncomfortable, dude. The acid is coming on like monsters, creeping up my neck and shit, and I'm just like, and I'm saying, did I say that out loud, and trying to keep small talk and starting LSD don't mix, Right. So we got the hell out of there, but this is the funny part of the story. So this is when we were practicing at CRS, which we had mentioned earlier. So Ray and John are in Ray's old, brown shitty Cutlass, looked like a cop car, like on drugs or something. It looked like a child molester car, right? So he had this thing. They're gonna take off and go to the practice spot. I'm like, okay, I'll meet you there. Well, I leave, and like I said, the acid's coming on, and I start going. I end up, I'm going from uptown, from Magazine Street.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go uptown to Canal.
Yeah. And
just ride Canal all the way down to Mid City. Take it just leisurely, safe, straight. Nothing back street. Well, it turns out it's fucking Bayou Classic weekend, which we call the Soul Bowl down here in New Orleans.
Which is the weekend, you realize the very weekend we're talking.
Right, exactly. It's this time.
This weekend.
So, okay, I get on Canal Street. If you've ever been in New Orleans, Canal Street's a pretty big street. It's one of the main fairs in New Orleans. Well, if you've ever been down here for the Southern Classic, it's just, it's two of the main black colleges playing football and a very huge event. It's a very big deal. Anyway, I get onto Canal Street. It's like bigger than Mardi Gras Day. There is no street.
Right.
It's just people, and I'm the only white guy in a 20-block radius. And I'm at a barbecue that I wasn't invited to. And the acid is really coming on strong, dude. I'm in my trooper, And I might as well have been on some African safari because, like I said, I was the only white guy, and people are like rocking my truck and knocking on my windows. Nothing violent happened, but again, I'm tripping, and it starts tripping hard.
Seemingly hostile environment for sure.
Oh yeah. And by the time I got to the end of Canal, I was probably in full fucking peaking mode. So, and then I have to I have to get the CRS and make it up the ramp and get through all the weird curves.
Yeah.
Then we do this 4 or 5 hour just jam, and John records the whole thing. So
and that was the basis of the basis of the band?
Well, no. It was this is a couple of years in.
Yeah.
But it was a basis for a big change. That kind of brought on the darker period that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But we wrote like 4 to 6 songs out of that were really dark but really interesting. Because there was times like we were playing, and it's like, in my mind, like you're a drummer, so you know what I'm talking about. Like you have your structured beats, you have your poly beats and things, but it was like backwards.
Yeah.
It was almost like I was hearing it, but I was able to play it if you could reverse the beat, if that makes sense. And I'm sure it was just my head games. But when we listened to the shit, it was like, whoa, and we would pull pieces, parts, and sections out, and we made 4 to 6 songs that were probably some of our darkest stuff. But John apparently, I think, has found part of that because we thought it was lost forever in Katrina.
Right.
But yes, if we can get a hold of that, I will try to get that to you.
Holy shit, man.
I would like to just sit down and listen to it and be like, you'd have to like have some time.
Yeah.
Because I remember just being totally insane. It was tripping very hard after going through all that experience, all the stress of.
Fuck. You might have some PTSD just fucking revisiting.
Dude, I'm sure I do. I'm sure I'm always a little bit, what's going on?
Looking over your shoulder, buddy?
But no, we had some good times. I mean, we would play shows and, drop and things would come on, the drugs would come on in the middle of a gig or whatever. But it was always, I think, there was a period of time where, especially in the early part to the mid part, it was just always fun, the energy of just jamming together. And we had a really good following of mixed people. The whole thing was different types of people coming to the show, so it wasn't just like niche people. We had our regular friends and stuff, but we'd always have a different type of crowd. And then I think when we got a little darker, we might have freaked some people out and things like that. But
it got dark and super fucking creepy.
Yeah, I have some friends like, to me it was fun and energetic, but I was
from
really
the audience
high.
Perspective. It was very creepy and
it was dark. We were pulling apart as members, like we weren't hanging out together on a social basis as much. I know personally I was doing a lot of drugs with other friends,
Right.
I know Ray, our old guitar player, was doing his thing. John still lived across the lake, so we would get together for practices and gigs, and that was about it, and we still enjoyed each other's company, but we were bringing our individual dark experiences together. So I think that played a lot. But that particular night, I think, was a real send-off to a lot of, like, all that energy had kind of come together. Yeah. And then we went by the time we were finally getting into studios and stuff like that, dude, I was doing some fucked up shit in the studio. I had strippers, I had drugs, it was like, because like drummer first day is serious. You're straight. You got iced coffee and pizza.
Right.
A slice.
Blaze
you're ready to go.
through it, get your shit done.
That's one slice of pizza and a 32-ounce iced coffee. How many albums do you want me to record? I'm ready to go. No drugs. And early in the morning too. I was always like, start me early. If I can come in like 11, because my energy's high in the day.
Yeah, me
Otherwise,
too.
The guitar players want to come in at midnight.
Vampires.
Yeah, and they're all weeded out and pilled. I was like, nah, what the fuck, dude? So when I would just come in, I would bring my coke and whatever, and my girls and fucked up shit while they're doing their stuff. So yeah, we recorded at the Masonic Temple.
Right.
So there was something about weird energy in the Masonic Temple.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Doing acid and coke and fucking strippers in the Masonic Temple is amazing. That's all I can. It has its own merits,
we've gone this whole time, we've been talking shit about shows and all this ridiculousness, and I didn't at any point even ask you how you even started playing drums in the first place.
I wanted to play since I was probably as early as I could remember. Being a little kid, I was kind of a weird kid in my house. Like I said, my grandparents raised my real parents, passed away when I was very young. I was raised by my grandparents. And then I think having my dad's music, the records, back then, with the kids today, a lot like my children now, will never have the experience of just looking at an album and wondering.
What the fuck is this going to sound like?
Exactly. And also going, man, if I only had a time machine. And I still, thank God for YouTube, because that kind of is a time machine. But
yeah, it is.
I had a lot of older relatives and and friends who would be, oh man, I saw it in, you know, Jethro Tull or King Crimson or Yes
Right.
back in the 70s, brah. Down
Right.
in the warehouse, it was Kayla.
Right.
You know, and you're like, oh man, you know, but you could just look at an album and it would tell you stories every time you heard the music. You'd hear a different story. You'd see a different picture. So I spent a lot of time being younger than everybody else with my records. And then I guess maybe Animal from the Muppets. I don't know. You know, maybe. Oh, you know, I'll tell you what it is, Jody. I just realized what it is.
Okay.
My parents, when I was in grade school, used to have big part about twice a year. They would have a giant catered party at the house. Big fucking party, like hundreds of people, catered with brass bands. And I remember, you know, it's my parents' pretty nice house uptown. And having a real New Orleans funk band playing fucking in your living room. And I'm like a little kid, you know, otherwise I would have never been exposed to this for years otherwise. And I remember seeing the drummer like, I want to do that.
No shit.
And then started listening to my dad's albums. I think the song that made me really want to play music was Manic Depression.
Yeah, it's a great rolling pattern.
Yeah, hearing Mitch Mitchell play that, and if you ever heard like cover bands try to play it, nobody can do that. What Mitch is doing, it's just off just enough.
Yeah.
But that song really made me when I was like, but what about Mitch, man? Look what he's doing.
Oh, yeah.
Jimmy's doing it, but look at Mitch. What is that motherfucker doing?
Yeah.
So that's what inspired me. I was like, I want to do what that guy's doing.
That's awesome.
You know, so. Yeah, and still, you know, he still inspires me.
Absolutely.
If you listen to Electric Ladyland, you can listen to that album about every 5 to 10 years, and you'll be like, I need to go back and start over. You know,
Right?
It's just insane.
One of the weirdest mushroom experiences I ever had was out in my parents owned a camp out in Manchac, Louisiana, spelled Manshac. For those of you listening to this who are wondering why a word would ever be spelled that way. But it is, and it's a place where my
It's
parents...
not a German film, weird German male porn film or anything.
Right.
It could be.
Right.
That's
It's
a
certainly
whole different thing.
Right, exactly. But I went out in Lake Pontchartrain on my dad's boat and just fucking cranked a boombox, listened to Electric Ladyland, tripping on mushrooms, like was holding on to the back of it, just kind of like floating in the lake, like intermittently hearing water, probably semi-toxic water float into my ears, and then hearing Electric Ladyland.
The best, my best LSD experience ever was that album.
Really?
My old band my high school band, we had asked my parents. I'm like, hey, I think Jack was like, hey, let's go to Florida for spring break. You know, we're like 16, 17. So we're gonna pile up in my trooper, pile up all of our equipment. It's a little 3-piece band, and a girlfriend stuffed all the equipment and all the stuff in there, and we're gonna go. And my dad's like, you know, I said, hey, Dad, we're going to Florida for spring break. He's like, okay, do you need some money for a hotel? I was like, no. Can we just get some maybe like gas, like $20? I was like,
Yeah.
He's like smiling like, okay. Yeah. He's like, I'm making out on this, and we're so stupid, you know. We're like, we're just gonna go, man.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Literally, we just went, and the first night we slept in and on top of the trooper, you know. Wake up at a Tom Thumb parking lot, and then the next day, you know, everybody, all these kids from high school, we knew were there, so we're just like, we'll find a place to stay.
Yeah.
Well, we started asking people, hey, can we play in front of your room? And so next thing you know, we're playing late afternoon, smoking a lot of pot, and there's like 1,000 kids on a sand dune. So it was probably one of the biggest shows I've played actually ever. And the next thing you know, we drop, and then I spend the rest of the night, you know, room hopping and meet this girl at the time. I, you know, fall in love instantly. And the sun was about to come up, and I had a jam box. So I go sit out on the beach, and I kind of, you know, the sand kind of made like a futon, so it was perfect. So
The old
like
sand futon.
Yeah, and it was nobody out there. And I put on Electric Ladyland, and then 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be came on as the sun was coming up.
Oh, man.
Like, dude, I got chills every time. And that was probably the most special, amazing, beautiful, personal experience besides my daughter and son being born. You know, but at the time, the most intense thing that ever happened to me in my life. I mean, it was I can't even put it into words.
You know what's interesting about you saying that particular song? The very experience that I'm talking about, being out in Manchac, off Manchac, out in the lake, floating there. The song that blew my mind was that very song.
I mean, for me, it was, and when I listen to it sometimes, it makes me think of my mother, who, you know, I don't remember at all. She died when I was 2, but it makes me feel like I know her and stuff. So it's a lot of weird, there's a lot of weird emotional stuff.
It's like returning to the womb or something.
Yeah,
It's some sort of
it's just
strange cyclical connection.
Yeah, and it's still, I can listen to it not on drugs and
Right.
still get, the passion's still there. But I think being in that frame of mind at that time, it's the energy got tapped. So that's tapped.
You tapped into it.
Yeah, it's there it's in my DNA.
Right. Fucking A. Mike Ogden.
Thank
Good
you,
talking
sir.
to you, brother.
Love you, man.
All right, y'all. I told you that was going to be fucking crazy. Thanks for checking it out, as always, and many thanks to Mike for the just constant absurdity. What a great storyteller, and just, man, Southern storytelling at its finest. Shit is just outrageous. I don't think I've laughed that hard for an hour in a long time. Check out Mike Ogden drumming any chance you can get, or go say hello to him at the Royal Brewery in New Orleans. That's about all for this one. Thanks again for checking it out. We'll catch you on the next one. Crash, bang, boom!